The next resolution is 68 in support of critical race theory in public K-12 education. This resolution outlines the U.S. Conference of Mayors' support for the implementation of critical race theory in public education. Are there any questions or comments on number 68? If not, I move for adoption. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please verbally signal nay. The ayes have it. Next is resolution 69.
Recent understanding is that to abolish whiteness is to abolish white people. Okay? Now that's different from white bodies, right? White bodies will still exist, but we will no longer consider them white people. I'll get into this a little more. But I'm trying to distinguish between whiteness, an ideology, white people, an identity, and white bodies, which is some kind of literal understanding there that then we graft the meaning of white people onto, right? But if you undercut whiteness as an ideology, one that a lot of the abolitionists suggest is parasitic, right? And it's an ideology that white people really depend on. But if we give white people an option out of that, and it's not just sort of words, right? It's sort of structural transformations. Then what I'm suggesting is that it also signals the withering away of white people.
That whites learn to be white. That suggestion by Thandika is that whites are not born white. They have to become white. And her suggestion is that white children who were not white originally, they were born human. Little by little, they have to be abused into becoming white humans. And this abuse is sometimes physical, right? Of being physically disciplined into whiteness, such as being bullied into whiteness. That's a phrase I like to use, whiteness as bully. But also it's psychological and cultural. And it becomes with caretakers and guardians, not the least of which, the more important caretakers and guardians are, of course, the white family, parents, etc. But it extends to the white nationhood as a caretaker, the white social system, the white social welfare, the white governance system. They also discipline and abuse white humans into whiteness. That is a very provocative statement. I would totally recommend reading that book. Commitment to social justice. That CRT research isn't just satisfied with describing the world as it is, but it is about intervening in that world. Not dissimilar to what Marx once said, that philosophy has hitherto described society. The point is to change it, right? Now I step into Marxism, which is a second critical framework for understanding race. This is one that a lot of people arguably aren't used to, because correctly speaking, most people understand Marxism as offering analysis or critical analysis of class. But Marxist theories of racism do offer fundamental challenges to race thinking and race thought, where they argue that race, in quotation marks here, is unavoidably caught in a reification of what is at heart an ideological or made-up concept.
It's when this becomes so front and center that everything else is shunted to the side, and we're discouraged from thinking very hard about anything else, and a whole generation is coming of age under this environment. That's when things get disturbing and people start writing articles and books, because what's happened is that this CRT, this critical race theory way of looking at things, is no longer being wielded as one perspective out of many. It's become a religion. And I don't mean like a religion. It is a religion. It actually has replaced, for many of the people who wield this ideology, what, for example, devout Christianity would have done for them, say, 100 years ago. We are witnessing the birth of a new religion. I feel almost privileged that within my lifetime, I have witnessed a new religion being born. And as with all religions that are born, the people who think this way don't think of themselves as religious. No Christian in 1400 thought of themselves as something called religious. The word didn't exist. It was thought of as just the way things are. It was thought of as truth. Well, now there's a new religion. And what this means is that people aren't only expressing a view. What they're telling you is that if you don't agree with this view, you're immoral. You're not supposed to be in the room. And as a result, not only Are we dealing with people who, for example, won't let you enjoy My Fair Lady? That was fine, in 1995 when I heard it. The idea is that if you don't think of power differentials as at the very focus of all intellectual, moral, and artistic endeavor, you're a heretic. You don't deserve your job. You can't participate in the conversation. And more to the point, you should be tarred on social media as an immoral person, as a racist, as a white supremacist. The idea being that we will not tolerate anybody who dissents from this particular point of view because it's immoral, and because the people who think this way honestly see themselves as having found a truth, a kind of truth that it's worth even a little bit of nastiness and even a lot of nastiness in order to forge. There's an expression that if you want to make an omelet, you've got to crack some eggs, and no revolution is tidy. The idea is we are going to forge ahead, and if some people get hurt feelings, and if sometimes some of this gets overdone, and in the final reckoning, some people will be revealed not to have been moral actors, well, that's the way things go. But I sincerely believe that the people who are members of this religion think of themselves as bearers of a truth. That's not crazy, that's not evil, but it's also extremely dangerous. And so if you just pull the camera back, you see that, yes, power differentials must be battled, sure. But for that to be the central focus of everything that we concentrate our energy on is something quite different. And what it really is, I hate to say, is that it's anti-intellectual, for one. It's a very important and yet rather easy way of looking at the world that discourages engaging with nuance, that discourages engaging with complexity, and discourages engaging with roughly 96% of what any intellectual endeavor consists of in favor of thinking about the power differentials. There are even people arguing and being given attention that subjects like physics need to change, that they need to open up to ways of analyzing things that aren't about getting the exact answer, that aren't about something as quote unquote white as precision, that physics needs to be more holistic. And if you wonder what that means, you should. And whatever it means, it's diluting physics to look at it that way. It's quite simple. That's a dilution of the marvel that physics has become. If we're talking about art, for art to only be about battling power differentials, for that to be what's considered the most interesting art, for any art that isn't sufficiently engaged in that to be dismissed and sometimes even condemned, that's less art. That is weaker literature, that is weaker painting, that is lesser music. It's just a subtraction of what art can be. When we look at, say, the scholastics, way back, read something written in France in 1250, and you notice the constant obsession with God and Jesus. Everything has to be consonant with that way of looking at things. Everything has to come back to whether or not God exists. And so you see someone like Thomas Aquinas, who clearly has an IQ of 717, but he's limited in a way because everything has to come back to that. And we see ourselves as having advanced beyond that kind of concern. There's nothing wrong with being concerned as to whether or not God exists, but most of us wouldn't want to go back to the idea that theology must ground everything that we engage. Notice that for them, that was what all morality, intellectual endeavor, and art were about. We've gone beyond that. We're going back to it. This particular CRT idea is, in that way, it's incurious, and in its way, it's medieval. The parallels with the way somebody who engaged in the life of the mind or the life of the artist, or the intersection between the two, 700 and 800 years ago in Europe, and the way we're being encouraged to think now, the parallels are almost eerie. The only thing that's different is the vocabulary used. And this new religion uses a particular suite of words that are elegant and somewhat frightening. White supremacist, for anybody in America to be called a white supremacist, scares you to your socks. And as a result, it's easy to think that it's sophisticated when actually it's a rather blunt, brusque, and crude religion. It's not a good religion, if you ask me. And some people have started asking, and so I've started saying it. This is the problem with the new religion. And what's important here is that the religion is not wokeness. I'm not talking about being a leftist. That's not a religion. I'm talking about woke people who are mean. I'm talking about woke people who are coming over the hill with pitchforks trying to hurt people because they think that that's necessary to creating a better world. That kind of religion, the problem with it is that it rules not through consensus, not through genuine suasion, but through fear. People are afraid of being called names. If there were no social media, this wouldn't be happening. A lot of this is Twitter's fault. What happens is that the people who are members of this religion, if you cross them, call you a white supremacist on Twitter. Next thing you know, you're being called all sorts of dirty names on Twitter. And most people aren't up for that. It's frightening. Luckily, in a way, I was first subjected to that kind of treatment within my own subfield in linguistics about 20 years ago. I remember how it felt at first. All these people are saying these terrible things about you, or sometimes it's just 2 or 3. And you wonder, is it going to destroy your career? Are they perhaps right? What did I do? Most people aren't up for that. We're buying food, we have children, we have vacations. You don't want to be called a racist on Twitter. So for 99 people out of 100, you just keep your head down, you pretend to agree with the sorts of things that you're being told, and as a result, there can be 2 out of 15 people on a committee who think this way, but all 15 will sign their names to some document or some kind of ideology because you're afraid of being called names if you don't toe the line. That's a reign of terror. That's not intellectual and moral advancement. And from what I see, especially over the past couple of years in the United States, which is what I can attest to because that's where I've been, there is a reign of terror. It's not that all of thinking America is coming to feel that battling power differentials is supposed to be the only thing that the intelligent person is truly concerned about. That's not what most people think because it's a very controversial, difficult to defend position. What people are realizing is that you have to pretend to think that way in order not to be called a racist on Twitter, in order to not have your job threatened, in order to be able to hold your head high at the neighborhood get-together.